Over the last year, we've seen some huge movies release. From remakes to sequels, blockbusters, and, well, Barbie. And so today, I'm going to be recreating some of the biggest movies of the last year, or so, in LEGO. So stick around to see what movies I make, and let's get building. The first film I'm going to recreate in LEGO is Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. In particular, I'm going to build the opening scene where a young Indiana Jones is fighting against a German bad guy on top of a train. This will be my first time building a train, so I'm definitely anticipating seeing how this is going to turn out. So let's get building. I began by building up a base for the mock. I placed down some Technic beams around the outside, and I placed in filler brick, which I plated over with green plates to create a base layer. I then used light bluish grey 1x1 plates and 1x4 dark brown tiles to make a really basic rail line. So we've now built up the very foundations of the mock. We've got a black border, some green plates and a rail track that's sort of half done. But before we develop this section any further, I'm actually going to go and work on the train. Now I've never actually built a train before in LEGO, so this is going to be very interesting. Let's see how it goes. I next began working on the train. As I said before, this is my first time building a train, so I tried out a lot of different techniques. I built up an inner structure using light bluish grey, black and dark bluish grey bricks. I then used snot bricks to attach plates to the outside to add a lot more detail. I then tiled off the top of the train using some slopes to create a nice curved design. So I've now done the roof, front and back of the train, and to be honest with you, I am very happy with how this has turned out. Considering it's my first time building a train or anything like this, I think it looks somewhat like a train, which is kind of what I was going for, so that's good. To make the wheels, I used 1x1 snot bricks and 2x2 circular light bluish grey plates. I then began work on the foliage, whereby I used a mixture of olive green leaf pieces and green spoked grass pieces. So I've now placed all the foliage around the train track on the base of the mock, and placed the train on the track itself. And on the whole, I think it looks pretty good, but now I need to work on the tunnel. The predominant bricks I used were 1x2 masonry bricks in light bluish grey, and I also added in some arch pieces, which gave me a really nice curved design. The minifigs for this build include Basil Shaw, who's an archaeologist, the German bad guy, and of course Indiana Jones, who needs no introduction. Overall, I'm super happy with how this build turned out. For my first time creating a train, I think I did a pretty cool design. In addition to this, I think it scales really well with the tunnel, and the minifig placement is pretty on point as well, with Basil Shaw holding on for dear life, as Indiana Jones and the bad guy are about to face off. Now onto the second movie that I'm going to be recreating in LEGO. We're going to be building John Wick Chapter 4. In particular, I'm going to build the scene where John Wick is falling down a bunch of stairs. Because why not? Also, on a quick side note, why is there a 10-hour loop of this on YouTube? And why has it got so many views? Am I doing something wrong? You tell me, I don't know. Anyway, let's go and build. I once again began by building up a base. I placed in 2x6 grey bricks as filler brick, and again used long Technic pieces around the edge, which will allow me to attach a black border. Okay, so I've now got the foundations of the mock done, and I'm next going to work on the height leveling of the mock. Then, using 2x6 grey pieces, I built up a rough outline of what I wanted the shape of the mock to be. I then began using 1x2 light bluish grey masonry bricks, which would go down on either side of the stairs. Next, I began working on the staircase itself. As you can see in the scene, the staircase colour is dark bluish grey, so I used a mixture of dark bluish grey 1x2 tiles and plates. The stairs are now done, I'm going to begin working on the top area. I then finished up the top of the mock by adding in the masonry bricks and tiling off the staircase area. I then began working on the railing. I then placed in a street lamp on top of the mock. The figures I'm using in this scene include a dead guy, which isn't really too uncommon in a John Wick film, and of course we need a John Wick, but unfortunately LEGO never made this, but thankfully Minifigs Me did. So what is Minifigs Me? I'm glad you asked. Minifigs Me is a UK-based custom minifigure company who sell a huge range of high-quality minifigures printed onto official LEGO parts. They have a wide range of products from politicians to celebrities, film characters, and even an option to design your own minifigure. And I have to say I'm super impressed with the quality of the print and the details on the torso, back of the torso, side of the legs, side of the arms, and the face. That is a lot of detail, and if we're going to be real, it's a lot better than what LEGO would make. So if you want to upgrade your minifig collection, hit the link in the description below and visit Minifigs Me right now. I literally mean it, why aren't you doing it? And so I placed the figures into the mock. Once again, I'm very pleased with how this scene turned out. I'm very happy with how I managed to catch the angle of the mock. I captured key elements, such as the railing, the street lamp, the positioning of the dead guy, and John Wick falling down the stairs. And with that said, let's get on to film number 3. Now on to our third film, I'm going to be recreating Dune 2. This film is packed with a ton of awesome scenes, but I'm going to build what is probably the most important scene of the entire film, where Paul Atreides rides a huge sandworm for the first time. Once again, I began by building up a base for the mock. I then used Technic pins to attach a black board around the edge, and placed in a few 2x6 grey bricks that would help me build up an exoskeleton for the mock. So I've now built up the base of the mock and I've placed a black board around the edge, and I've also done a sort of exoskeleton, I think that's what you call it, for where the sandworm is going to appear to be underneath the sand. Using the snot technique, I attached some large tan plates down the side of the build so that none of the inner workings were showing. It was then time to detail the build. I used a wide variety of different tan pieces, from different shaped tiles, to plates, and curved bricks as well. I placed them all in a random pattern, so that I could get a really natural look to the build. Once this was done, I added in some dark tan pieces, and overall I think this turned out quite nice. The minifigure I'm using for this mock is Paul Atreides, and I placed him in on top of some transparent cylinder pieces, to give the illusion that he's flying in the air, and holding on for dear life. Overall, I'm quite pleased with how this build turned out. I think I got the general idea across, and certainly replicated the minifigure positioning from the actual scene. Now obviously, if I was going to build this accurately, the sandworm would have to be like 200 times larger, but for a mini build, I think I've replicated the scene quite nicely, and got the idea across. Now for our fourth movie that I'm going to recreate in LEGO, we're going to be building Oppenheimer. This is probably my favourite movie that released over the last year or so, and so I'm super excited to recreate the scene where Oppenheimer visits the bomb site the day before they drop it for the first time. Again, I began by building up the base of the mock, but unlike the other builds, I'm not going to be doing a black border, but rather a more freeform design. Because this scene is set in a desert, I again used tan pieces to create an accurate depiction. And so now that I've made a freeform base, I'm going to start working on the structure that holds the explosive device. I used light bluish grey arch pieces, which I put together in a symmetrical design, which would be the main support for the structure, which I then put together. I then had to create some extra supports, which would jut out to the side of the main structure, and I repeated this process 4 times. And placed them all into the build. Okay, so I've now built up the main structure of the mock. I'm very happy with how this whole thing turned out. I've got several different details and techniques I've used, which you're going to see later on, but first of all, I want to go and work on finishing the mock by adding some details down below. So let's get to work. For the surface of the mock, I predominantly used tan tiles, but also placed in a few plates here and there. I again placed them in randomly to make it as natural as possible, and did my best to make it flow as much as possible. Of course, the minifigure I'm using for this scene is Oppenheimer, who is once again provided by Minifigs Me, and the figure design is very accurate to that of the movie, so he'll fit into the mock quite nicely. Now this build is complete, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I think I definitely captured the general idea of the scene, with the supports of the structure, and of course the structure itself. If I was to make this build more accurate, I'd likely have to make the structure a whole lot bigger and taller, which is something I might revisit one day. And now for our fifth and final film that I'm going to be recreating in LEGO, we're going to build none other than Barbie. I can't believe this is what it's come to. Anyway, in this scene, Barbie is driving down a pink road in her pink car with her pink boyfriend Ken, for some reason. Anyway, let's go and build it. I began this build process by once again building up a base for the mock. I placed Technic pieces around the edge, and used Technic pins to attach a black border. I also used 2x6 grey pieces as filler brick, but made sure to leave the middle bit free, because that's where I'll be placing the pink road later on. I then used tan 2x6 plates to plate over the filler brick. Then, using the snot technique, I placed in the pink road. And so now that I've done the pink road, I'm going to start working on the details in the desert. I wanted to create a smooth surface for the desert, so I predominantly used 2x2 tan tiles. However, once I placed all these down, I filled in the gaps with either smaller tan tiles or tan plates. I then began working on the foliage of the desert. Unfortunately, I don't really have any cactus pieces, so I made do with what I had. Once this was done, I spawned in a Barbie car. Whilst it's not 100% accurate to the car we see in the scene, it keeps several of the same details, like the overall shape, the amount of seats it has, and the colouring it uses. Now of course the figures I'm using for this build are Barbie and Ken, but once again LEGO have never made these, but thankfully Minifigs Me saved the day. Both of these custom minifigures are very accurate to the scene, and they even include some accessories like a handbag. I then placed Barbie and Ken into the car and put it on the mock. Overall, I'm very pleased with how this build turned out. I certainly captured the scene quite well, with the pink road going through the desert. And for my first attempt at making a car, I didn't think I did that bad of a job. And so that's 5 of the biggest movies of the last year, or so, recreated in LEGO. Subscribe and let me know in the comments which movies I should build in future, and that's pretty much it. I'll see you next time. Hopefully.